Stephen Stanko was the first time that I've ever seen a person get 2 death penalties on 2 separate cases.
Does the death penalty indicate that some murder victim family members' lives are more special than others? And the answer is yes.
Well, we begin this Sunday in South Carolina with the execution of Stephen Stanko. Now, last time we talked to you, the state Supreme Court had set the convicted double murderer's execution date for June the 13th. Shortly after, though, his legal team asking state prison officials to release more information about firing squad and lethal injection. We know that those protocols are fiercely guarded by law in the state of South Carolina. So we start with this continuing controversy here on Connected to the Capitol that we've been talking about for weeks now. Catherine Glenn Foster, Dave Wilson. Not a week has gone by in the last month or so where we have not addressed the issues of executions here in South Carolina. Now that we have another one seemingly set for mid-June, it appears it will move forward unless something drastic happens between now and then. Let's talk about these items that these attorneys are asking for. The chances of them getting them are pretty much slim to none based on state law, I have to think.
Yes. Now, just a little background information for our viewers. So there are 3 methods of execution here in South Carolina. The convicted felon can choose between the firing squad, the electric chair, or lethal injection. And we have seen issues with a couple of these different methods, even just in the last few months since executions restarted here. We saw botched lethal injection. We've also seen what appeared to be a botched firing squad that you yourself
for Michael
witnessed. Exactly. And so when you compare that to the previous firing squad, which you were not there for, in that case, the person perished in mere seconds.
Well, from what witnesses say, yeah. It was
exactly.
Less than 10 seconds, maybe less than that even.
Exactly. Whereas the one that you were able to witness, Mahdi, it took apparently close to a minute.
I would say that's about right, yeah.
Right. And so now as we move into our next execution here, Stephen Stanko, there are continuing questions about all these different methods and whether South Carolina can stomach the system that we have put into place.
There have been a number of calls for investigations into firing squad protocols by a number of people on both sides of the political aisle.
We talked about it last week. We talked about the fact that Representative Neil Collins out of Pickens County, Justin Bamberg out of Bamberg County actually have called for investigations on this. When you look at a situation where the question is, were there 3 bullet holes? Where did it pierce the heart? Because, not to get into too much gory detail, but the patch is put right over a heart. Doctor identifies exactly where it is. The bullets are supposed to go into the center of the target, and they're designed, as we talked about last week, they're designed in such a way that they're supposed to basically explode the heart in seconds. But if the autopsy is correct from what we heard from Mahdi,
the abbreviated autopsy.
Right.
The abbreviated.
Yes.
Then what ended up happening is it did not shatter the heart. It only got 1 ventricle.
It did damage it.
There are 4 ventricles in your heart. If you only are getting 1 of those, that can lead to a longer death. Now, there's some people who are going to be like, fine, long death. If you killed somebody else, then that's fine. At the same time, Catherine, we've talked about this before. There's cruel and unusual punishment that we're supposed to be protected from.
Yep.
Where did we find that balance? That's the question I've got.
And that was the issue that already came before the court systems about approving these methods, the 3 methods, a firing squad, lethal injection, and electric chair. Now, according to Stephen Stanko's attorneys, he was leaning towards choosing firing squad because, again, as you noted, inmates do get the chance to choose one of those 3 methods. Lethal injection's also been questioned, too, about how long it potentially could take. This is some of the video from Stanko's arrest here almost 2 decades ago. He was convicted of killing his girlfriend and also an elderly man and convicted of raping his girlfriend's daughter and slitting her throat, but she survived. But a horrible case, without a doubt. Yeah. But that's not what's at question here. He's convicted, no questions there. It's what comes next. it's what comes next, and no one knows.
Right, and so many inmates who are facing the death penalty, they choose the firing squad because we've been told that it's the fastest, the quote-unquote cleanest, simplest, least painful method of execution, and now increasingly there are questions about that.
Well, that was the thing that Brad Sigmund basically said.
That's why he chose it.
He chose the firing squad because, ironically, hearing secondhand from someone who does work on death row, it's like, I've been shot before. I mean, once you're shot, you're shot. And it wasn't a lethal shot, of course, for him until the firing squad. But keep in mind, the firing squad became an option because for the longest time, for almost a dozen years, we did not have a law in place that would be what's called a shield law, which basically says we're not going to tell you who we're buying the drugs from because that can get very problematic. And so we only had one form of execution, and that was the electric chair. So Dick Harpootlian, then a senator from Richland County, former prosecutor, turns around and says, well, let's just bring back the firing squad. So that's what they did.
So they did.
And that has been a form of execution. But keep in mind, we've only executed someone in South Carolina twice now.
By firing squad. And it would appear that only one of them went according to what we believe are to be the protocols. Lacking the medical knowledge to know what happens to a human body upon impact of bullets, I can't say that for certain. I just know what I saw that day. And I know it didn't line up side by side with what I was told happened in the first firing squad execution, where it seemed death was nearly instantaneous.
And we heard
not
that
the second time around when I was the witness to the Michael Motti execution.
We heard that from Eric Collins.
Yes.
I mean, Jeffrey Collins.
Yes.
We heard that from
Who
Jeffrey
was there
Collins.
with me for
and Jeffrey has covered, just so you know, Jeffrey Collins is with the Associated Press. He has covered every execution for the last
more than a decade.
More than a decade.
Yes.
And he has an understanding, and as you well know, because you sit there with your pen, and as a recovering journalist, you sit there with your pen, and you're writing down everything. You're looking at the clock. You're looking at what's going on.
Yes.
Because you are the
eyes
public's
and the
witness
Yes.
to this.
That's why we're there.
Right.
That's why we're brought in. So we'll see where it goes. Now, and one other thing that maybe could put the issue to bed. David Pasco, the solicitor, has called a week ago for the governor to say, hey, just release the entire autopsy report with all the details because I know it was done right. So will that happen? Who knows?
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about him too.
We certainly are.
Oh, yes, we are.
Because
we have a lot to talk about on this Sunday morning.
We do. We're going to talk about that, in fact, when we come back. All right, welcome back to Connect to the Capitol here on Sunday. You're looking at two men right there who could be potential candidates for South Carolina's Attorney General. David Pasco, the solicitor on the left, Senator Stephen Goldfinch, you saw on the right there. Now, we mentioned David Pasco in our previous segment and how he entered into the fray of the death penalty conversation here in South Carolina. Now, no one can declare for any statewide races yet, but that doesn't mean the fields aren't taking shape. Pasco recently, in the last 5 to 6 weeks, switched political parties to Republican.
Yes.
The video you saw was from that event,
right.
in fact, where he announced it. Stephen Goldfinch has been a prominent voice at the State House this past session, especially when it came to investigating the $1.8 billion phantom money mystery and Curtis Loftus, our state treasurer. So there you go. That's where we are now. But we already have an attorney general at the moment who hasn't said he's leaving office. We think he might be running for governor. But
we are in the everybody shift. Everybody move chairs real quick because who's going to end up where is the real big question, because you've got 7 different elections that are going to be happening as what we call the statewide constitutional officers. You've got a governor and lieutenant governor who run together. You've got the attorney general, you've got the treasurer, you've got the secretary of state, your superintendent of education, and then the last two, the comptroller general, which was the guy who was behind a lot of the stuff that we discussed in the $1.8 billion boondoggle, and probably the one that most people do not do a lot to think about, but it is the #1 industry in South Carolina, and that is the Commissioner of Agriculture. Agriculture is now considered the largest industry in South Carolina. Keep in mind, that's also when you go to the gas pump and you see that little circle with a little stamp on that, that is the Commissioner of Agriculture whose responsibility it is to make sure that your gas pumps are right as well. So we've got all of those people, all of those offices that are now have to be filled.
By someone.
By someone.
And everyone is circling at this point. Even earlier this week, we saw Pasco and Loftus, the man himself, go down to Myrtle Beach, Goldfinch's backyard, and have an event together.
Right.
So everyone...
Can't imagine why they would do that in his backyard.
Yeah, interesting.
This is what we talk about on Sunday mornings.
So it really is musical chairs with, questions about A.G. Wilson and not so many questions for the most part.
I don't think so.
Well,
He just has to say it.
Let's just keep this in mind. Okay, so Henry McMaster was the lieutenant governor. Nikki Haley ends up winning the governorship. Then Donald Trump wins in 2016, and the shuffle happened then because Henry McMaster, keep in mind, was the first elected official in America to endorse Donald Trump.
Was.
Right.
And guess what? He called in that chit. And he got Nikki Haley put at the UN. And when that happened, he slid right in there. And in June of 2027, he will leave office as the longest serving governor in South Carolina history.
His dream job.
Right. It's the one job that Henry McMaster has wanted. So we know that the governor's office, the governor's position, has to be filled. But we've got 4, 5 names right now that credible names that are floating around. You've got the current Attorney General, Alan Wilson. You've got the Lieutenant Governor, Pam Evitt. You've got Senator Josh Kimbrell. You've got the possibility of Senator Sean Bennett. And then there's also Congresswoman Nancy Mace.
And we'll talk about her later.
And there's also the rumor that Congressman Ralph Norman is giving it consideration as well. It's going to be a wide open field, and that is just the Republican side.
Yeah, we haven't heard much
from the Democrats yet.
We haven't.
Yeah.
So, well, that one is, read the tea leaves, as they say. Exactly. Read the tea leaves. We've seen a lot of Alan Wilson here on this show in the last month.
It's why we have this show on every Sunday morning, so that you can actually hear from these folks. Get some in-depth conversation and have a better understanding. So over the next several weeks, please be expecting to see major names coming through here, because we're going to have not only the conversations that we have here on our set, but we have an extended conversations that we do every single week with the major interviews that we do with our Connect to the Capitol extras. That's where you can listen and get a much deeper understanding about what it is that we're discussing. More than just 4 or 5 minutes here on this show on 8:30 on a Sunday morning.
We can take 30 on just one topic if you want.
Exactly.
And we do.
And if you want to have ideas about things that you would like us to be talking about, please let us know, because we want to be giving you the information that you need to make an informed decision.
This is your information. This is your state. These are the offices that you are going to elect people to fill.
And many of the names that we've even been talking about have
come through.
Exactly. They've been on the Connect to the Capitol extras, and we're getting some of that insider information as well about some of those alliances that are forming, priorities, and kind of reading those tea leaves.
Absolutely. Speaking of those interviews, you've got one coming up here in the next segment about the USC medical campus that's taking shape. So.
The Bull Street campus is getting ready. 16 acres on the Bull Street campus is getting ready to become home to the USC Medical School. We'll have more with an interview from the Vice President of Research from USC when we come back.
Yes.
Big news on the Bull Street campus. The University of South Carolina has already now broken ground on a medical school expansion. It's going to be moving from the Garners Ferry area right over there to 16 acres right there in the Bull Street campus, right in the middle of downtown South Carolina's capital city of Columbia. Joining us today, the Vice President of Research for the University of South Carolina, Dr. Julius Fredrickson. Thank you so much for coming on today and to give us a better idea about the vision of where things are going with USC's medical school.
Thank you so much for having me. A lot of big things happening at USC, and I'm glad to be here to talk about it.
Absolutely. Well, so glad you're here to join us. Dr. Fredrickson, what does this new health science campus at Bull Street mean for the future of medicine and medical research in South Carolina? I know you've been a driving force behind USC's research vision.
It's going to put us at a completely different level. On top of the great education that we provide to our students across the board when it comes to the medical and health sciences, this is going to also greatly increase our capacity to do research. And at the same time, that research benefits the citizens of South Carolina, because a lot of the things that we focus on, stroke, Alzheimer's disease, epilepsy, you get the best available when you have a hospital like this, when you combine it with the research. So it's a win-win both for the university and for the state and the citizens of the state who are going to be taken care of by all these big initiatives that we're undertaking.
So this was part of a larger initiative that the university has been taking on this particular front. You had word that you were going to have to move from the campus, basically from over there, the VA there on Garner's Ferry, and found this location. The state has set aside money in the budget, which is going to be approved next week. And when we look at this, we're looking at an opportunity now for the South Carolinians across the state to get benefit from this. So it's not just, oh, there's a new campus here on Bull Street. It is much larger than that. What does this mean for all of South Carolina when it comes to what you're going to be doing there?
Yeah, so it's really two big buildings that we're focusing on right now. One is the actual medical school building, which is teaching and research, and the one that we're talking about and hoping that will get funded by the General Assembly now is the hospital. And the hospital is really a game changer when it comes to taking care of neurological problems, like Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, which is probably vastly underdiagnosed in the state of South Carolina. So providing a hospital that will focus on very general neurological care, everything from neurosurgery to neurology over to rehabilitation. So this is something that is not available, certainly not in the state, and really not in the Southeast. Maybe the closest thing would be the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, but for us as a state, this is a game changer.
I can certainly see that. Now, I know that you have focused a lot of your research on neurological issues, brain science. When it comes to things like Alzheimer's and stroke research and stroke recovery, how specifically could this new center help on that front?
So it's a very fast-moving field, and in the past where most of the advances have happened, they really have been maybe in Boston, San Francisco, maybe at big hospitals in Texas, not in South Carolina. So this is going to put us, we hope, in the top 3 for neurological care in the country. And for making sure that that's available to all of our citizens, it's going to be incredible.
When you think about what you're now going to be able to do, having a campus more consolidated in the downtown area, not that far from the university, you're blocks away from the main campus now as opposed to several miles. And you think about the expansion that you're going to be able to do and the access to all of these medical services. You were talking earlier about the buildings that you're going to have and the work that you're going to be doing. So what does that begin to look like for the South Carolina community for what you're going to be able to do?
Yeah, so I would say, especially in rural areas of South Carolina, we have what we call neurological deserts. There's just no neurologist in a whole county, and we have several of those counties. We started the Brain Health Network about a year ago, focused on Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia in collaboration with primary care. We now have 5 different clinics that are up and going. That got funded by the South Carolina General Assembly. We expect that that's going to be at least to 10 clinics at the end of this year. It goes from that rural focus to a new brain health center, which will come online in the next year in the same district, and then finally into this large hospital. So we will cover the whole spectrum of neurological problems.
And just briefly, are you expecting this new facility to attract some of the new top talent in our nation now that we'll have really a center, a hub?
Yes.
For research.
Absolutely. And so we get a lot of federal funding for research, and that benefits our citizens, but also that turns to care and treatments for those patients. We need the top-notch faculty and researchers from around the world, certainly within the country, to move to Columbia and be a part of this amazing effort, and we expect that that will happen.
We're going to have a much longer, extended conversation with Dr. Fredrickson on our Connect to the Capitol Extra. Make sure that you catch that at WACH.com. We'll have more on Connect to the Capitol in just a few minutes. It's Sunday in South Carolina.
After you say the number, we'll just, Senate version will be what we'll say in our respective sections to let you know that we're agreeing with the Senate proviso.
That's how the sausage is made at the State House, essentially, what you're hearing right there. A conference committee of House and Senate lawmakers meeting throughout the week, this week, to get down to finalizing the state budget, which will come when the full House and Senate comes back at the behest of the governor here, not too long in the distant future.
It's 28th.
I mean, in the near future.
28th of May.
28th. They're coming
back on that day.
So, and you know, it's just days away.
It's going to be an interesting time. You know, part fiscal planning, part political theater, and entirely South Carolina.
And a lot of reading of line items, which I know is very exciting to people at home, but it is important,
right? I mean,
because it's about services that the state offers, from education to roads to all those things.
And it's $14.3 billion.
A lot of money
of state tax dollars that we're
real
looking
money,
at here.
not phantom
real money, not phantom money. This is real money. This is your money that is actually being attracted here. But this is an important part. I mean, and if you take a look at who is included in that conference committee, you've got 6 very senior members. 3 from the House, 3 from the Senate. You've got Bruce Bannister, who's the chairman of the House Ways and Means. You've got Leon Stavronakis out of Charleston. You got Lee Hewitt out of Murrells Inlet. On the Senate side, the Senate Finance Committee chairman, Harvey Peeler, who has been the longest now serving member of the General Assembly in office right now. Thomas Alexander, who's the president of the Senate, and Darrell Jackson from here in Richland County. So a lot of experience.
And a lot of work to do still.
And a lot of
work. But it will get done.
Right.
It will get done. It always does. And we have faith that it'll be done the way that we hope. and we can get some potholes fixed. And we can get everybody's children taught. And they'll have teachers in the classroom. And we know that there's been a push, real push to fund public education in the state in the last 4 or 5 years.
Especially the teacher increases, the conversations you've had.
Big deal. It's a big deal.
Yeah, education is such a priority for the governor and for so many in our state, especially in the Senate. In the House.
The teacher pay going up to $48,500, going up to $50 next year. So,
they're ahead of schedule on their pay raises. One quick item before we get out of here. We mentioned during our political field of candidates taking shape, Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Again this week, upping the ante on some allegations about voyeurism, couching it in a committee meeting in Washington about strengthening those laws at the federal and state level. This is something we've talked about. We don't want to spend too much time on this here, but I do want one comment to be made here. We do have a soundbite from her. If you could play that, Dylan, real quick.
Real men guard a woman's privacy, but predators harvest it. When predators install covert cameras or forge explicit images, they do not just invade a room, they invade a life.
Again, that was during a presentation, a committee meeting in the nation's capital this past week in reference to a bill she's passed about voyeurism, or not passed, but presented on the floor there.
Introduced, exactly. So it's certainly important. And what she says there is so true of the victim hotline that she was sharing. But at some point, we also have to question, back to political theater, at what point are we using that national stage where we were elected to serve the people of the state, the people of our nation, and turning it into more of a personal vendetta where we're sharing these very intimate photos.
There were.
And keep in mind, this is part of the thread of the political theater that is going on. We have the primary elections in South Carolina where probably 90 to 95% of who's going to be elected are probably going to be decided in those primaries. That's coming up in June of next year. We are 12 and a half months away from a major election in South Carolina. And that is what we're going to be really focusing on really over the next year.
Yes. And a lot of the things presented there, of course, allegations made against a former fiance and some friends and colleagues of that person. So that's where we're going to end it this week as we look forward to the budget being finalized in South Carolina.
And the Senate and House coming back to vote on that this week.
Back to work after the Memorial Day holiday. So hopefully everyone's enjoying the Memorial Day weekend. Make the most of it. Unofficial start of summer. Well, in South Carolina, it's the start of summer. We've already had our 90 degree days.
This afternoon.
So we will see you again next Sunday here in South Carolina.
Have a good Sunday.